Committee on Oversight and Government Reform will come to order, and without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare recess at any time. Preparing for this hearing is one I've been, I'm telling you, it's hard to keep your cool in preparing for this meeting. And let me tell you the heart of why we're here today. Immigration Customs Enforcement. I have met with the men and women who work there, the wonderful, hard-working, dedicated people who do a hard and difficult job. But I got to tell you, what's going on at Homeland Security, what's going on with Immigration Customs Enforcement is one of the most infuriating things I think I've seen in this government yet. In a 3-year period, Immigration and Customs Enforcement has released more than 86,000 criminal aliens into the American public. These are people that were here illegally, got caught committing a crime, were convicted of that crime, and then instead of deporting them, they were just released back out in the United States of America. All told, they had more than 231,000 crimes that they were convicted of. 86,000 of these people. In 2015, 196 of these people were convicted of homicide, and ICE released them back into the public rather than deporting them. 124 of those that were released between fiscal year 2010 and 2015 went on to commit homicide. Let me give you some other stats. In 2013, ICE released 36,007 criminal aliens who were here unlawfully and present in the United States. As of September 2014, 5,700 of those individuals went on to commit additional crimes. In March of 2015, ICE Director Sarah Saldana testified before this committee that during fiscal year 2014, ICE released another 30,000 individuals with criminal convictions. In fact, ICE released 30,558 criminal aliens in 2014 who had a combined 79,059 convictions instead of deporting them. Of those 30,558 criminal aliens, 1,895 were charged with another crime following their release. Their convictions included sex offenses, assault, burglary, robbery, driving under the influence. And ICE told us that in 2015, the agency released 19,723 criminal aliens with a combined 64,197 convictions, including 934 sex offenses, 804 robberies, 216 kidnappings, and 196 homicide-related convictions. And that's on your watch. They were here illegally, they got caught committing a crime, they were convicted of the crime, and instead of following the law and deporting them, you release them back out of the public and they commit more crimes. How do you look those people in the eye? How do you go back to a family and say, you know, they were in our detention and we just thought it would be better to let them out into the United States of America? That is so wholly unacceptable. I want to show you this football stadium. This is Notre Dame football stadium. You've released more people that were convicted of crimes that should have been deported than you can fit into that stadium. You'd still have people waiting outside the line. Those are the criminals that you released instead of deporting. Now, one of the people that's very passionate about this issue and has spent a lot of time on that is our colleague, Mr. DeSantis of Florida. I'd like to yield time to him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we in this country, the government at all levels has a responsibility to protect the safety of the American people. For the federal government, most of the crimes that are committed, particularly violent crimes, are handled at the state level. And I wish we could prevent every crime from happening. I wish we could. But the fact of the matter is we rely on deterrence, we rely on penalties to prevent people from even trying to commit crimes in certain instances. But in this case, this is an example of where government could have prevented all of these crimes. You have somebody, and the story that came out I thought was just shocking, where between fiscal year 2010 and February of 2015, there were 124 individuals who were in the country illegally, had been previously detained by ICE, and were released that were charged with homicide. You look at the number of convictions that we've seen for people who have been released by ICE even after being convicted of rape, of homicide, of domestic violence, violence against women, other sex offenses. This is putting the American people at risk. Something is wrong. Something needs to change. We've tried to highlight this over and over again. We get the numbers of convictions finally given to us for 15, and it's startling because we're told that, oh, we're going to focus on really getting these criminals, but yet you have criminals in your possession, don't have a right to be here, they should be returned to their home country, and yet they're released into American society, and then they reoffend. So, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for having this hearing. This is immensely, immensely frustrating issue to see this, because some of these crime victims, the families, you can say to them, had the federal government simply done its job, maybe your loved one would be here today. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Director Saldaña, who's about to testify before us, has testified before. She said, quote, "We welcome any amount of money that we have. We can always do more with more resources. We are just doing the best we can with the resources we have right now," end quote. Except in June of 2015, Department of Homeland Security leadership took $113 million from ICE's enforcement budget and asked Congress to reprogram it to other DHS components with no role in immigration enforcement. Further, in the latest budget justification, Homeland Security seeks $185 million less for deportation and transportation. Despite a mandate in the law requiring ICE to maintain 34,000 detention beds, ICE only wants funding for 30,913. The administration's failure to secure our border, enforce immigration laws, and hold criminal aliens accountable creates an ongoing threat to our public safety and sometimes delays consequences for innocent Americans. And many of those losses are preventable. The numbers became real in February of 2015 in the National Security Subcommittee hearing. During the hearing, we heard testimony from Mr. Jamil Shah, whose 17-year-old son was murdered by Pedro Espinoza, an alien living in the United States illegally. Mr. Espinoza had been released from jail on a conviction for brandishing a weapon before the Shah slaying. This is a weapons conviction. We also heard from Mike Roenbeck, the uncle of Grant Roenbeck. Grant was 21 years old when he was killed in Mesa, Arizona while working an overnight shift at a local convenience store. Guys just working at the convenience store late at night, trying to do the right thing. The alleged killer was in removal proceedings due to a burglary conviction, but released on ICE on a $10,000 bond. Grant was killed. The Roenbeck and Shaw families are not the only victims of crimes committed by aliens unlawfully present in the United States. Today, we continue to put names and faces with individuals whose lives were changed forever by the death of a family member killed by a convicted criminal alien. The common thread among these stories we're about to hear today is that each of them were preventable. If ICE had only followed the law, it is highly likely that these witnesses would not be sitting here today grieving the loss of another loved one. And I thank the family members that will be joining us on the second panel. They are heart-wrenching stories, and it was preventable. It didn't have to happen. You could have deported them, and you chose not to. And it's just infuriating. My time's expired. Let me recognize the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Cummings, and other distinguished members of this committee. I cannot tell you how disheartening it is to sit here and hear an issue and very important issues related to the topic of immigration reform be bandied about as a political football. I'm a former United States attorney. I was a prosecutor for 10 years. I am about the law and law enforcement. I'm about identifying problems and correcting them. I am here to tell the public what the situation is with some of the issues we face, inform the public, and I would really appreciate we focus on solutions as opposed to political banter. Along with our sister agencies at the Department of Homeland Security, ICE has no smaller mission than the national security, border security, and public safety of our citizens. Like any law enforcement agency, we deal with serious and difficult matters every day. In the area of immigration, recent estimates are that there are about 11.2 million illegal immigrants in the country. There are approximately 2 million undocumented immigrants who are involved in some form or fashion in ICE's administrative process. There are about 500,000 of those who are part of active cases in the immigration courts. ICE detention program booked in approximately 300,000 individuals last fiscal year. And as you know, we've been funded at the 34,000 bed level for the last couple of years. You, the Congress, have not only provided the funds to carry out our responsibilities, for which we're very grateful, but you've also set forth the framework to execute those responsibilities. And it's all right here in the Immigration and Nationalization Act. You tell us who we are required as a mandatory matter to detain, and you tell us who we exercise our ability to release someone and not detain, make a decision about not detaining or bond for that matter. Given the numbers I've just cited, obviously, a very small percentage of individuals are detained while an immigration judge, under the system that you, the Congress, has provided, are detained while that judge makes a decision in their removal proceedings. I am deeply mindful that this is not simply a discussion of statistics, capacity, policies, or procedures. There are families whose lives are personally affected by these decisions. As a human being and a mother, never mind my prosecutorial experience, I feel very strongly anytime someone is injured or murdered or killed, otherwise killed by any person, and certainly those within the immigration system. I know that the women and men of ICE work tirelessly to enforce the law and protect the public, and they steadfastly bear the enormous responsibility that they are charged with. When the chairman, respectfully, sir, says we just decided, that's being ICE, to let them out on the streets and, quote, we chose not to detain people, that is misleading the public and particularly these victims about the immigration situation and the entire picture. I think this committee well knows that this year, over two-thirds of the criminal releases, something I wish you had pointed out, over two-thirds of the criminal releases were as a result of the Supreme Court telling us we had to release someone, wasn't ICE choosing to do so, and another portion of the courts otherwise telling us that we had to release the immigration courts, who have overall supervisory responsibility over this system. So to sit there and say that the proud women and men of law enforcement in ICE are choosing to release criminals is absolutely unforgivable. I am very proud of representing those men and women. Many of them are former police officers, sheriff's department members, and they do not go around trying to put criminals on the streets. So I want the record to be clear, and I want these victims' families to know exactly what ICE is facing, and I want them to have an accurate picture of that. So when ICE makes a custody determination upon an alien with a criminal conviction, we act in accordance with the law that you have given us. We are committed to carefully reviewing the circumstances of each case to ensure we make prudent decisions and to use the tools at our disposals, including supervision and conditions of release. Further, we include in our data set things over which we have no control. When somebody's claiming to be a citizen or an LPR, there are additional requirements on us. This is a very complex law, and every time, or virtually every time, I have been before a committee, I have begged, I have asked, work with ICE, work with me, work with the Secretary for comprehensive immigration reform. We can't kick this down the road or after an election. We need to fix this, and I implore you to help us. So, this issue has been of great importance to me since I started at the agency about a year and a half ago. In March of last year, I set up a system that I think I've testified about to this agency to review every criminal release that there is. We have a panel that I've actually visited with. I'm in the process right now, like I do with any policy, of revisiting the policy to see how effective it's been over the last year. because we started it in March, and to see what we can do better with that in that regard. I am willing to learn, and I do listen. So, as you're aware, we're proud of the fact, and I think it's as a result in part of this panel, of going from 36,000 releases in 2013 to, in 2015, a little over 19,700. So I want to be sure it's clear that while two-thirds of the criminal releases in 2013 and 2014 were characterized, even here, as resulting from ICE determinations, that ratio actually is reversed in 2015, and as I said earlier, we have about two-thirds of our criminal releases being required of us by courts. And with respect to what Congressman Cummings pointed out, and that is the recalcitrant countries and getting people to take back their criminals, this world is a chaotic world. We have countries with great instability, countries that have suffered tremendous, even natural disasters like Haiti, and are in turmoil, and trying to deal with them is very hard. But I am working with the Department of State. Quite frankly, this afternoon I'm meeting with Assistant Secretary Michelle Bond to talk some more about what more we can do with respect to recalcitrant countries. And I'm glad to do that. Let me conclude by saying that having heard directly from families over the last 11 years of victims of crime who suffered tremendous loss, I personally remain committed, Mr. Chairman, I personally remain committed to implementing ICE's priorities in a smart and strategic manner and to safeguard our communities and maximize the agency's success. I thank you for the opportunity to address the group, and I await your questions.
Thank you. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. The numbers you gave us just in the last 2 days, discretionary releases by ICE were 54%. The total was 46,422. The Zavidas rulings, you said, were two-thirds of the reason, and yet the numbers you gave us show that it's less than 10%. Your microphone, please.
I don't know which numbers you're looking at.
You're the one that said that two-thirds of the reason that you release people is based on a Supreme Court decision. The numbers you gave us just 2 days ago show that that number is actually less than 10%.
The numbers we gave you, sir, were for 2015?
We have 2015, 2014, and 2013.
Okay, let's just focus right now on 2015 as an example, although we can do each year if you'd like. 19,723, there were 19,723 criminal releases.
Let me ask you another way.
No, because you've just left an impression that more than that has happened.
No,
11% were Zavidas releases. And IJ orders, the immigration courts that oversee the entire immigration system, were 52%.
Okay, we will hash out the numbers with your own numbers, but what is unacceptable is even one discretionary. Why do you even release one? Why do you even release one person?
Because of the statute the Congress has given us.
No, it's not. It's discretionary on your part, and you're not doing it. You took more than $100 million and let it go to other purposes outside of the Immigration Customs Enforcement. You're not maximizing the amount of money that you want in order to get to the beds that is mandated under the law. And you've asked for $185 million less for detention and transportation. You're not going to be convincing us that you're dedicated to removing these criminal aliens.
If I may answer your question?
Well, yes, go.
You have said here only a certain number of convictions even, they're primarily convictions, offenses with convictions, are subject to mandatory detention.
And this is where you're totally wrong. You have somebody who commits homicide? Yes, we want them deported. That's the law.
Then put it in the statute, sir, because in the statute say if they do not commit one of those offenses that are specifically enumerated, including aggravated felonies, then these people are not subject to mandatory detention, which you specifically outlined here. When I say you, I mean the Congress. The rest you say, okay, ICE, you will then make a determination based on what the judges, federal judges of this country make every day, and that is based on flight risk, and harm to public safety or potential harm to public safety, you will decide which ones can be released.
And there's a whole list of categories there that are harm to public safety, including those that commit homicide, that you went ahead and released anyway. And so that law is crystal clear. You are making these discretionary choices in releasing these people out into the public, and they're committing more crimes. And I don't understand why you don't deport them. Use as an excuse these countries that won't accept them. Here's my question for you. Based on Section 243D of the Immigration Nationality Act, how many times have you recommended to the State Department in writing that these countries are, according to the law, on being notified by the Attorney General that the government of the foreign country denies or unreasonably delays accepting an alien, and then it goes on, that the Secretary shall order the consular officers in that foreign country to discontinue granting visas or non-immigrant visas? How many times have you made that recommendation to the Attorney General or to the State Department?
I don't have the precise number, but we have.
Have you ever?
Yes, we have, sir. We have a
Which
memorandum.
countries, right off the top of your head, which countries have you recommended that
I can't tell you off the top of my head. I hate
When will you get me that information?
I can get it to you within a week, sir.
Okay, so you will give me, just to make sure we're on the same page, the letters that you have given either to the Attorney General's office or the State Department regarding the problems that you're having with and the recommendations that you're making about the countries that will not accept these aliens.
And yes, and you understand that I have to talk to the Department of State about that, because some of these are sensitive areas that I believe we can talk about this further in chambers, sir, that I believe you would not want me to
No, we're going to talk about it in the public. I want to know which countries are not taking, because you know what? They shouldn't be getting federal aid, and we shouldn't be giving them visas so that more people from those countries can come to the United States. I don't know what you think is so sensitive about that, but I want you to prioritize Americans rather than those other countries. That's what I want to hear. I want to know that the citizens of our states are your #1 priority, and put it out there in the public. Let's know and understand which countries are not taking back the criminals that came here illegally and should be deported back into their country.
Let me remind you, sir, that the Department of State is the one that issues visas, withholds aid. We don't have money to give aid to countries. That's not what we do.
I know, but
we do have a memorandum of understanding with the Department of State where we say we are going to recommend to you certain steps, but we have it in a step-by-step procedure, because this is a complicated world, I think you all understand, and we have to look at each country separately. Syria and Iraq, that's a pretty hopeless
that's your
situation
job
in trying to return those immigrants to those countries.
Do you really think Syria and Iraq is your job and your responsibility to make that determination? Here's what the law says, and I'm quoting, "On being notified by the Attorney General that the government of a foreign country denies or unreasonably delays accepting an alien who is a citizen, subject, national, or resident of the country, after the Attorney General asks whether the government will accept the alien under this section, the Secretary shall." And so if you go to the first part of it,
what, sir?
Shall order consular officers in that foreign country to discontinue granting immigrant visas or non-immigrant visas, or both, to citizens, subjects, nationals, and residents of that country until the Attorney General notifies the Secretary that the country has accepted the alien. What is incumbent upon you, personally, in your duty and your role and responsibility, is to make that notification. If you are trying to take even just one alien and deport them back to a country, these are criminal aliens. Remember, these are ones that committed crimes and were convicted of crimes. If you're trying to deport even one of those and the country won't take them back, you need to give that notification to the State Department.
And the State Department makes the decision. Let's just be clear.
And no, there's no decision, because under the statute it says the Secretary shall. And so it starts with you. And if you don't give them that notification, it doesn't work. My time has expired. I want to have, within a week's time, all of those letters, since you've been in office, that you have sent to the State Department and or Attorney General, telling them where there's a problem. And I don't want to hear about this excuse any further. Now I recognize the gentleman from Maryland.
Let me pick up just where the chairman left off. When that letter goes to the State Department, what happens then? Who makes the decision at that point? What happens?
There's a leadership group. The Consular Affairs Assistant Secretary, Michelle Bond, is the person I've been dealing with. She makes a recommendation to the Secretary of the Department of State, and they look at the whole picture with respect to that country and make a decision and notify us.
And then that is the decision?
Yes, sir.
And so you can't change that?
ICE is not in the business of issuing visas.
I see. Now let me, I want to make sure we put all this in some kind of context, because remember what I said in my opening statement, we're about reform and trying to find solutions. And we have these families here who have suffered greatly. And by the way, I hope that, I know you may be leaving after your testimony as is usual.
I'm staying.
Oh, good, good, because I want you to hear from them. I think they need to, they want you to hear their pain. And again, they come a good distance, and that, I thank you very much for doing that.
And I offered to both families, the Roots and Ms. Hartling, to meet with them personally.
Thank you very much. We need to eliminate any misperception that immigrants as a group are more likely to be criminals or commit acts of violence. Let's start with the likelihood of landing in jail. Census data from 1980, 1990, 2000, 2010 found that incarceration rates for native-born, essentially U.S. citizens, were 2 to 5 times higher than that of immigrants. Were you aware of that fact,
Yes.
Director? The fact contradicts the misconception that immigrants are inherently predisposed to be criminals. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So studies have widely shown that recidivism rate for immigrant criminals is lower than for the general population. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And for example, based on the data submitted by ICE for fiscal year 2014, less than 5% of the immigrant criminals committed new crimes after release, compared to more than 20% of all criminals across 30 United States, U.S. states. Do you understand that?
That sounds right. I've looked at the studies by the Department of Justice and the statistics.
Given this information, do you believe it is fair to say that a person's immigration status does not indicate an increased likelihood that they will commit another crime?
Yes.
Now, I got to tell you that if I were the family of a victim, I would say, well, Cummings, you know, I'm really not interested in hearing that, because I suffered a loss that will never be replaced. But I'm trying to just put all of this in some kind of context, because I think if we look at the total picture, then we have a better chance of coming up with a solution that it truly addresses the problem. Now, I'd like to discuss the cases in which ICE has discretion. The Chairman talked about discretion, and I think he was absolutely right to address that. ICE has explained in the past that some criminal immigrant detainees are released after posting bond set by career ICE law enforcement officers. Can you please tell us again, why not simply deport all criminal alien detainees that you have the discretion to deport? And is it a question of resources?
It's not so much a question of resources, sir, as it is the statute. Congress, in its wisdom, gave people who were found in the country and determined initially to be in the country illegally a very complex set of rights and ability to appeal and to have their cases heard by immigration courts. Let me just make this really clear. We cannot, we'd be violating the statute, which I think no one here wants me to do. We cannot deport somebody without a final order of removal from a court. ICE doesn't deport people on its own motion. It has to have an order from the court. And obviously, we've got to have the ability to put that person in the country of their origin.
Now, ICE has reported having the resources to deport only about 4% of the 11 million documented immigrants. Is that right?
That's right. And in fact, I think you all have seen the studies that indicate that if we tried to deport 11.2 million people, it would cost anywhere from $650 billion. $650 billion to $750 billion.
So ICE also explained that discretionary releases typically occur when individuals associated with less serious offenses. Based on your experience as a prosecutor, you were a former U.S. attorney?
Yes, sir.
I have tremendous respect for our U.S. attorneys. Why is it important for law enforcement agencies in general to have the discretion to release individuals on bond? What's that about? Well,
again, it's important for us because we have to manage the money that this Congress has given us. But I want to repeat, the bond procedure, the decisions to detain are all, or not detain, are all outlined in here. We must look at flight risk, threat to public safety when we make those decisions. But you have given us that authority. And it's important for us because we've got to manage the number of beds we have and obviously the entire fund that you have given us in order to remove people from the country.
I only have a minute left on my time. I understand that these determinations are based on risk evaluations, giving consideration to factors like age, physical and mental health, risk of harm to public safety, risk of flight, and whether any mandatory detention factors apply. Director, can you please explain why it's important that these evaluations are conducted on a case-by-case basis? And then, knowing what you know and hearing what you know you're going to hear, I want you to tell us things that we could do as congressfolk to help you do the job that you're trying to do.
Okay. If I may start with the last part of that question first, I would love to sit down with this committee or a group of this committee to go through this statute and talk about comprehensive immigration reform, what we can do with respect to some of the very complicated parts of this. And let's not forget, this is just the statute. We have rulings left and right from all over the country, literally going left and right, that we have to abide by, even though we may be appealing them. But with respect to your overall question regarding discretion, we have committed to deal with each immigrant on a case-by-case basis. Because we don't have, I don't think we have the will, nor do we have the funds to deport 11.2 million people. We have to make decisions on a case-by-case basis. Bright line rules don't work here. If we have a bright line rule that we're going to deport anybody who comes into our custody, we don't have time to do what we've been trying to do and very successfully done, and that is focus on criminal aliens. So this is why we need to have that discretion and ability to make the decisions that we do. And I will tell you, sir, are we perfect? I have great faith in the judgments of our law enforcement officers in making these determinations. They are experienced, well-trained, and they care about the safety of our community. Are we perfect? I can say firsthand I am not, and neither are our officers, but we do the very best we can.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Now I recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Micah, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, and I do want to echo the Director's remarks that our Customs and Border Patrol are some of the most professional, accomplished, hardworking individuals in the federal government. They work day in and day out to do their job in protecting our borders, but we do hear that things have affected their ability to control our borders. First of all, the number of deportations total is down fairly dramatically in this administration. Isn't that correct, Director?
The numbers are lower than it has.
We have a chart there. Can you guys put the chart up? So at the end of the Bush administration, we were deporting about 250,000. We're down to about 100,000. 2014, maybe even lower than that. That's total deportations, right?
No, sir. I think you say up there
It's
interior.
total. It's total deportations. And then if we turn to criminal.
Your chart says interior deportations, not total.
Yes.
Interior, there's also on the border removals.
Right. Again, well, in this case, I'm taking they're in the United States, in the interior, not at the border. In any event, criminal deportations were 110,000 in 2013, and now they're down to 63,000. I don't have a chart on that. Those are numbers provided by you. Is that correct? 63,000 in 2014. I don't know what 2015 is. Well, I'm sorry, 2015 is 63,000. I don't have 2014. And 2013 was 110. In any event, it's down.
Those are not the numbers I have.
Well, again, all I can go is by what we got from you all. And you've said that the law prohibits some of your actions to deport. But actually, the agents tell us, well, two things. First, they say they're hamstrung by the President's executive order that has granted some amnesty to millions of illegal aliens That's what the agents say. Have you heard that?
From our agents or from Border Patrol?
From your agents?
I've heard reports of that, sir.
Okay.
Nobody.
Again, they're telling us that. They also say that some of those people even, again, that there was a court decision, and ICE has admitted, however, that of the 2,457 of the 30,000 releasees, that would be the number affected by the court decision, which was Zadias versus Davis, so that 57% were actually released at ICE's discretion, at your discretion. So we have more than half of those at your discretion. And that's we've had hearings, we've had your folks in, and this is what they're telling us. The other thing, too, is you have the right to deport people, and again, the discretion is given to you. Again, your agents have told us, but in more than half the cases, you haven't exercised that discretion. Then you also have, when the courts do let some folks out on appeal, these criminal aliens that have committed an act, how many times have you appealed the bonds?
Bonds, some occasions. I don't have the precise number.
Could you provide that for the record? Because I think it's fairly limited.
I can
But
provide
you have that discretion, too. So 57% of the time where you have discretion, you haven't exercised it. Then where people have committed it, they're out on bond, and you could appeal and go after those folks, you don't do it. One of the other things that was brought to my attention is we've lost total control of the border. And this is most disturbing. Got this yesterday. This is the Customs and Border Patrol system, the entire system that deals with passport control. This is just the last 2 months, from March 4th, 2016 to April 17th. The system has been down almost 2 total days, and this is a record of the time the system has done. The system we have to control our border and who's coming in is imploding. I don't know what's going on here, and I'd ask maybe the chairman of government operations or whoever is in charge of this area in our subcommittee to look at this. We've lost control of our borders, and your system that protects us, and the main computer system, has been down, 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 and I think this is something that needs to be looked at. I'm going to hand you a copy of this, and I'd like you to respond to these statistics.
Are these ICE statistics or Customs and Border Protection?
Custom and Border.
That's another agency,
Yes,
sir.
but this is the system that controls the passports and entry into the United States. And you're also in DHS. I'd like to have a response for the record.
We should get the witness best able to
Okay,
answer
and
the
you'll help
questions
me with that, and I appreciate it.
regarding CBP.
Thank you.
Yes.
The gentleman's time has expired. We'll now recognize the gentlewoman